Hello there, welcome to chapter 6 and 7 of Street Child. I've had a little break for a week or two during the Easter holidays, just spending time with my family, my children, and I hope you've done the same. I hope you're coping well with lockdown, not getting too bored, but now we are back at school, technically. I thought I'd start doing a couple of chapters, or at least 2 to 3 chapters every week, and give you some writing to do as well. I've had a really good response for it on YouTube and on Facebook, so thank you very much. Massive hello to the children in my class. I hope you're well. I've spoken to a few of your parents, and I know you're doing your parents proud, so well done for that. I know it's not easy at the moment for any of us, but particularly for you, because you're used to going to school, and it's not easy when you're 10, 11 years old or whatever, and you're stuck at home and nothing to do. So well done for keeping your parents sane, and hopefully we'll get back to school soon and we'll see you. You should have the YouTube link sent through your Class Dojo to your parents, so you can get in touch with me through Class Dojo, and you can show me any work you've done on the YouTube channel, on Class Dojo or on Purple Mash. If you want to try and put it up there, that would be great. Hopefully I'll see you all soon, and you're all well. Everyone else watching this, I hope you're enjoying the story. If you're producing work as well, and you're enjoying your writing, then brilliant. We have got at least 20 more chapters to get through, so hopefully you will enjoy the story, and you can produce some excellent work and keep on with your writing. So the chapter 6 is called Tip. So we know that Jim is in the workhouse, and he's determined to escape. So chapter 6. At first, Jim couldn't tell one boy from another. They all had the same sallow, thin faces and dark, sunken eyes, and they all wore the same scratchy grey clothes and caps. They had their hair cropped and combed in exactly the same way, except for the boy who had spoken to him in the yard. His hair had a wild way of its own. He found himself following his boy around because he was the only one who he could recognise. But it was a long time before he spoke to him. It was a long time before Jim felt like talking to anyone. He was numb and wrapped up inside himself. But it was one morning in the schoolroom that Tip spoke to him and became the nearest thing to a friend that Jim could ever hope to have. The schoolroom where the boys spent every morning was a long, dim room with candles set into every other desk. The little window had been painted over so they couldn't look out. There was a fireplace at one end with sheets steaming around it. Old women sometimes wandered in to see to the sheets, putting wet ones up and taking down the dry ones to be packed off back to their big houses. These were the washerwomen, and this was their workhouse job, washing the clothes of the rich. The women would sit by the fire from time to time, mumbling to each other in low drones during the lessons, sometimes cackling out remarks to the boys or shouting out the wrong answers to the deaf old schoolmaster's questions. There were 4 big arches across the ceiling with letters on them, and Mr. Barrack would begin every day by pointing at the arches and then by asking one of the boys to read out the words on them. God is good, God is holy, God is just, God is love, the women would chant out before the boys had a chance, sometimes in the wrong order just for fun, and they would nod to each other and screech with laughter. One morning, when it was Tip's turn to answer the question, he turned to the women and held out his hand for them to speak. They shook their heads and pursed their lips, shaking with silent laughter, and Tip, taken by surprise, laughed out loud. Mr. Barrack shook him by the back of his jacket, half lifting him off the floor. "There's nothing to laugh at here," he shouted. "No, sir, there ain't," agreed Tip, and was giving another shaking. The women loved this. For the rest of the morning, Mr. Barrack read out loud to the boys, pacing up and down the room as he did so the candle flames fluttered in his wake, and his black shadow danced on the walls. Curled in his hand was the end of a knotted rope, which he swung as he walked, striking it across a desk from time to time to make the boys jump awake. Every now and then he stopped and pointed at a boy who had to stand up and recite the sentence he'd just heard. If he got it wrong, Mr. Barrack swung the knotted end of the rope across the boy's hand. As a change from reading out loud, Mr. Barrack would shout at one of the boys to fetch him his shabby old copy of Dr. Mavor's spelling primer. He would pounce on any boy. "Spell Chimbley," he would shout, swinging out his rope in readiness. One morning, the boys were given chalks and slates to use. A visitor had brought them in as a present. They sat on the desks through the morning, and the boys all watched them lovingly, longing to have a go. "Now you can write," Mr. Barrett told him at last, easing himself onto the high stool of his desk and grunting with the effort. Tip put up his hand. Please, sir, what should we write? Speak up. What should we write? Tip roared. Mr. Barrett roared back. What should you write? The Lord's Prayer, if you please. Jim risked a look around at the boys as they bent to their task, their breath smoking from them into the cold air. He put his elbows on the desk and his head in his hands. He was bleak inside himself, lonely and bewildered and afraid. Beside him, Tip squeaked his chalk across his slate, scratching out scrawly shapes. His tongue poked out between his lips as he worked. He glanced sideways at Jim. Why ain't you writing? He whispered. Because I can't, Jim whispered back. I never knew how to write. Quaw, it's easy. Tip's eyebrows shot up and disappeared into the tangle of his hair. Just wiggle your chalk across the slate like this. His chalk scraped and laboured. There. He leaned back in triumph and blew chalk dust off his slate. He showed it to Jim. Quaw, that's good, Jim agreed. What does it say, though? Tip's amazed eyebrows shot up into his hair again. I don't know, can't read. Jim sputtered into his hands, and Mr. Barrett jerked awake. He hobbled down the side towards Jim. Did you laugh then? Jim felt as if he had frozen into his seat. His lips stuck together as if ice had formed between them. No, he didn't. It were me. Tip jumped up as the schoolmaster swung his rope in readiness and swished it down across the boy's outstretched hand. The women folding up the sheets by the fire cackled. The other boys sat in total silence while this was happening, staring straight in front of them, their arms folded. Mr. Barrett towered over Jim. What did he say to you? Jim forced himself to stand up, his legs trembling like reeds in the wind. He said he can't read, sir, he whispered, and he had to shout it out a few times more until Mr. Barrett could hear him. Can't read? The teacher bellowed. Can't read? I'll say he can't read. What's the use of teaching boys like him to read? What do any of you want with reading or writing, miserable sinners that you are? He pulled Tip's hand towards him again and lashed the rope across it. Jim glanced at Tip, afraid to speak. He could see that the boy's eyes were wet and that he was nursing his hand under his armpit. Right, Mr. Barrett barked, and Jim picked up his chalk and scribbled furiously with it, just as Tip had done. At the end of the morning, Mr. Barrett told the boys to get out their instruments, and with a great shoving of desks and scuffle of boots, they ran to the big cupboards at the end of the room, only to be shouted at and made to do it all again in silence. I'd have got it anyway, Tip muttered to Jim under the noise. His eyes were still wet. Did it hurt? Jim asked him. Tip shook his head. Once Barrett starts hitting you, Barrett always hits you, he said. He blew his hand and stuck it back under his armpit. Every day if he can. Just don't let him have a chance to start. Tell Barrett Tip did it if he blames you for anything. Tip will get hit anyway, so you might as well. A drum was placed on the desk for them to share, and Tip stood up and reached out for a stick. At a wave of the schoolmaster's hand, the hymn tune started, such a thumping and wailing that the washerwomen ran out with their hands over their ears. It was like nothing Jim had ever heard before. Tip poked him with a drumstick and mouthed at him over the row to bang on the other side of the drum with it. Jim just tapped it out first. He watched Tip to try and work out some kind of rhythm in the mess of noise, and he saw that all the boys seemed to be chanting something, the little black holes of their mouths opening and closing into the thunder of drums and whistles, while the candle flames flattened and danced like tiny white devils. What are you saying? Jim shouted, as close to Tip's ear as he could get. Tip turned towards him. I hate this place. Jim could hear Tip's voice, faint and wailing of the beating of his drum. He had his eyes shut. He thumped the drum in time to every word. I hate this place. Bang, 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 bang. So do I, said Jim. Bang, bang, bang. He closed his eyes and put his head back. He shouted into the darkness, opening up his throat to let all the tightness out. I want Dad. I want Ma. Bang, bang, bang. I want Emily. Bang, bang, bang. I want Liz. Bang, bang, bang. I want to go home. Mr. Barrett raised his hand and the sound stopped as if it had been torn away in shreds. Silence. Utter, swirling, hugging silence. Jim felt his thoughts tumbling into it and then settling into calm. He felt better. Okay, just a quick drink before we do chapter 7. Cheers. Chapter 7, The Wild Thing. Joseph. Jim asked a bent man one day out in the yard, "How long you been here?" "Been here?" Joseph swung his head round and peered up at Jim. "Seems like I was born here. Don't know where else, son, and I don't know all of this place neither." He leaned against Jim so he could swing his head up to look at the long, high building with its rows of barred windows. "I haven't been in the room where all the women go, though. Long ago, I must have been in the baby room, I suppose, with my ma. I've been in the infirmary wards. But there's all kinds of little twisty corridors and attics and places I've never been in, Jim, and I don't want to neither. It's the whole world, this place is." He spread out his hands. "The whole world." "It ain't, Joseph," Jim told him. "There's no shops here, no cabbages, and no trees." He closed his eyes, forcing himself to try to remember what it was like outside. "And there's no river. There's a great big river outside here." "Is there now?" said Joseph. "I should like to see that river. Though to tell you the truth, Jim, I don't know what a river is. Tell you something." He put his arm over Jim's shoulder to draw his ear closer to his own mouth. "I don't want to die in here. If someone will let me know what day I'm going to die, I'll be grateful. I'll climb up over that wall first." He dropped his head down again and stared at his boots, whistling softly. "Aye, that's what I'll do." Tip sputtered and nudged Jim, but Jim was looking up at the high walls that surrounded the workhouse and at the bleak sky above it. "How long have I been here, Tip?" he asked. "How should I know?" Tip hugged his arms around himself. "Keep moving, Jim, it's cold." It was impossible to tell one day from the next. They were all the same. School, sack making, bed. The only thing that changed was the sky. Jim had seen the grey of snow clouds turning into the soft rain clouds of spring. He'd felt summer scorching him in his heavy, itchy clothes, and now the sky was steely grey again. And the pump had long beards of ice on its handle. I've been here a year," Jim said. It was then that the little secret promise that had nestled inside him began to flutter into life like a wild thing. "I've got to skip off." He let the mad thought rise up in him. "If I don't, I'll be like Joseph. One day, I won't remember if I was born here or not. I won't know where anywhere is but here." During lessons that day, the old schoolmaster's voice droned on in the dim schoolroom. The boys coughed and shuffled in their benches, hunching themselves against the cold. Jim's wild thoughts drummed inside him, so loud that he imagined everyone would hear them. He leaned over to Tip and whispered in his ear, "Tip, I'm going to run away today. You going to come with me?" Tip sheared round and put his hand to his mouth. Mr. Barrack sprang down from his chair, his eyes alight with anger and joy. "You spoke," he said to Jim, triumphant. "It was you." Tip closed his eyes and held out his hand, but Jim stood up. He didn't mind. He didn't mind anything anymore. The teacher hauled him off to his stool and swung his rope around. It hummed as it sliced through the air. "I don't mind," Jim tried to explain, but this made Mr. Barrack angrier than ever. At last he had caught Jim out, and he was beating him now for every time he had tried and failed. He pulled a greasy handkerchief out of his pocket and wound it round Jim's head, tying it tight under his chin. "Just in case you feel like collaring," he said. All of the boys stared in front of them. The rope stung Jim again and again, and the beating inside him was like a wild bird now, throbbing in his limbs and in his stomach, in his chest and in his head, so wild and loud that he felt it would lift him up and carry him away. When the schoolmaster had finished with him, he flung him like a bundle of rags across the desk. Jim lay in a shimmer of pain and thrumming wings. He wanted to sleep. The bell rang and the boys shuffled out. Jim felt Tip's hand on his shoulder. He flinched away. "That's what they do to the boys who skip off, Jim," Tip whispered. "They thrash them like that every day until they're good." Jim felt the wild thing fluttering again. Only if they catch him. They always catch him. Bobbies catch him and bring him in, and they get thrashed and thrashed. Jim struggled to sit up. The stinging rolled down his body. "Won't you come with me?" "I daren't, honest, I daren't. Don't go, Jim." Jim looked up at the great archways of the schoolroom. He knew the words off by heart. God is good, God is holy, God is just, and God is love. "I've got to," he said, "and I'm going tonight, Tip." Okay, so that's the end of chapter 7. So, some work you could do on that, possibly. You could think about how you think Jim's feeling at the moment. He's just taken pretty bad beating in the workhouse and he's determined to go. He's been there over a year. He's promised himself the time is to go. The time now is to go. He can't take any more. What do you think he should do? Do you think he should try and escape the workhouse? If we know if he gets caught, he gets sent back and he gets beaten again and again and again and again. But if he escapes, then he gets some sort of freedom. Even though he might be back on the streets, he's still got a bit of freedom. Try and, if you can discuss it with someone you live with, either your mum, your dad, whoever your brothers, sisters, whoever you're living with, and try and discuss it with them. If you can listen to this together possibly, and discuss the reasons why he should or shouldn't. There's good reasons why he should try and escape, and there's also reasons why he shouldn't try to escape as well. Have a good discussion of it. Try and jot some reasons down. Maybe you could do 2 columns of reasons for the reason why he should escape and the reason why he shouldn't escape. There are reasons for both. Once you've done this, try and decide what you think he should do. Should he escape? Should he risk it or not? And what I'd like you to do, what you could do, is to write a persuasive letter. If you think of all the persuasive work you've done over the years in primary school, think about the persuasive language you could use to try and convince Jim. If you could write it as if you are, you could write it as if you're Tip, if you want, or you could just write it from as yourself, and make it really clear what you think he should do, and give the reasons for. So remember, you think about when you're answering a reading question, maybe, and we were going to do the SATs, but now we're not, obviously, with APE, answer, prove, explain, and you can use evidence for your explain part as well. If you've got a really good reason why you think he should or shouldn't, try and provide an extra bit of evidence or reason why he should or he shouldn't, to try and convince. And like I said, that really good persuasive language as well. You could use some emotive language, tug at the heartstrings, to make it really clear what might happen to him. So hopefully you'll enjoy that piece of writing. Everyone likes writing letters. You're writing as a friend, so it'll be an informal letter as well. So you could always try and use a bit of dialect, a bit of slang in there. So I spoke in the bit of a southern Cockney accent, so you could perhaps try and write like that as well. I hope you enjoy your writing, and I will do chapter 8. Just chapter 8 yet, in the next couple of days. If you could find my YouTube channel, it is Mr Maiden 76. All the videos will be on there. I've also got my Facebook page, which is also Mr Maiden 76. I've had a few people post things on there as well. If you can leave any comments, that would be fantastic, and I'll put this up straight away. Hopefully you are all well. You are dealing with lockdown as best you can. Try and get out in the garden if you've got one. Stay at home, stay safe, okay, and be kind.